Oh man. Yeah, I'm sure that's all it takes, Ron.
All right, we have inched past the 1:30 mark, so I'd like to just welcome everyone to this afternoon session. My name is Thomas Levanchi. I'm an assistant professor in geography at Oklahoma State University. I teach a class to first-year honors student. It's called The Secret Life and Turbulent Future of Water. And students are all different majors. And it sort of reminds me of when I go to a variety of conferences as a geographer and as a water person. You know, you can be at a conference that's just on technical things of water, or maybe it's on something like WASH, or maybe it's just completely in a geographical region. But I'm reminded that there's a lot of different people coming in a shared space that have different expertise, and getting people together really is kind of the point of our session for today, is getting a lot of the pieces of the system in the same space and thinking about a central idea. In my class on water with students, invariably we get around to the amount of people around the world who don't have access to clean drinking water. And my often naive first-year students ask, well, how many people, and why is that the case? And so we start talking about in the 1980s, the decade of water, and wanting to get access for everyone. And here we are 3.5 decades later, still with a lot of the same challenges. And so all of us sort of share that perspective of how do we move the needle on getting people access to water. One of those things in doing is not just in reaching more people, but is in thinking about the systems that we're using to get people water. And so part of what we're trying to do today is really get people who are producing knowledge on aquifers in Haiti together with policymakers and practitioners, and saying, how do we all work together and take advantage of these sort of things? So this session really came out of some collaboration with my colleague, James Adamson, who is with Northwater, which is here in Chapel Hill. It's a bit of a hybrid organization in that they do consulting work, but they also do some NGO work and work in a lot of places. James is really an expert on hydrogeology in Haiti. He's been there since 2006. and to James's credit, has a long-term commitment to being there, not just working with people and generating capacity on the ground with partners on the ground, but generating knowledge and allowing that to inform decisions, and then sticking around and saying, how do we make that knowledge available? So I've done some work with James, and we were in Malaga, Spain in 2019 at a hydrogeology conference. We're talking about some of these projects that we were working on, and we were actually in touch with, at the time I was an associate editor for Hydrogeology Journal, and we were talking with the chief editor. We thought, well, how do we take some of these data that had been commissioned to look at some specific issues in Haiti and make that more broadly available? And so that kind of generated some conversation. And then how do we get people in the same room, people who are doing a variety of things, all with the same goal in mind and working on that? So this side event really comes out of that. What we're going to do in the minutes that we have is James is going to go over this topical collection that he and I worked on to get published, open access in Hydrogeology Journal, and all of, not just the analysis, but all the data are available. Quite a number of the studies were commissioned by the IDB. Unfortunately, they're not able to be here with us today. They were going to be, but we want to talk about what difference do these studies make, and how can these data be available to other people, people who are in the business of making sure that more people have access to water. So we've got a panel planned. We have some people, a variety of people who have been involved in Haiti for quite a while. Dr. Rick Gelting, who's with the CDC, Ryan Rowe, who's with Handwash, will be up here with us. Neil Van Dyne, who is founder of Haiti Outreach, will be here. And then we have some distinguished delegates who probably many of you saw yesterday at the plenary session from Haiti. I believe we have Guido Edouard, the general director, Dr. Ruth Angerville. I don't know if we have, is Danielle here as well? Okay, so we're going to have access to all of these voices. And then if we have done our homework and math right, we'll have a little time for a Q&A at the end. So without further ado, I need to go over a couple more slides here. Yes. All right, here we go. Thanks for keeping me on track. Okay, so specifically, why are we here as it relates to Haiti and these data that were generated? Haiti is unique in that 95% of the water comes from groundwater, which in the Caribbean is quite unique. It has a lot to do with the geology, the limestone geology formations that are there. A lot of the water comes from these alluvial aquifers. Groundwater is considered one of Haiti's most important resources. So the work that was generated here was largely driven to ask questions: how do we give people more access to water in Haiti? Those are driven by the IDB, but understanding where the water is coming from and how it moves, and how does climate change factor in on that. These data are considered, they're kind of scarce in the sense that not enough data are out there. And then those that are out there can be scattered in reports from the 1980s all the way up to last year, and just in different places, and asking, how do we get these limited but valuable data all into the same place and make that available to people who are making decisions, who are making policy, who are trying to implement things on the ground. So it kind of came out of that. And then at the last point, that's the long-term frustration of lost or unavailable data that is sitting in an archive, maybe just in printed paper somewhere, trying to get all those into a coordinated place, accessible to someone around the world who has an interest in making a difference in Haiti and bringing these data together. So that's kind of why we're here. So it's going to have a bit of a hydrogeology, which James is going to go through, kind of what we looked at, what we were able to publish in these findings, and then to ask the question, what do we do with that? How do we move that forward across these various opportunities that are there? So the panelists will be a part of that. James is going to start off with an overview of these articles, as well as why does that matter? So James, come on up. I think I've done my part here.
Thank you, Thomas, and thanks to UNC Water Institute for accepting our proposal for the side event. We struggled a little bit with this. One of the things that we needed to do after we published these papers was to communicate in a conference setting and to the public. And we decided to come to here because we could go and talk at a hydrogeology conference, but there's not a lot of Haiti actors at those conferences. So we decided to come to this conference and present these results and bring DINAPA and various stakeholders that are active in participating in Haiti all together. So the topical collection, I'm going to basically talk about for about a half an hour. And then we're going to use that topical collection as basically a case study or an excuse to discuss with the stakeholders and the delegates from DINIPA. And so Thomas mentioned a little bit about the origin of this topical collection, but after the 2010 earthquake, I started working with my colleagues, and Javen Miner is here somewhere. Javen and I have done a lot of this research in Haiti over the years. And after the earthquake, we started working a lot with international financial institutions and trying to help them and the government of Haiti better understand the water resources. And it got to a certain point where we had done so much work and had so much data and so much knowledge, it was just kind of all retained within us or lost in reports that were never really made available or published. And so I started engaging more with the IDB. For us to continue doing this kind of work, this stuff needs to be available and published, because everybody's always asking me for the data. Then I got to go ask you for if I can share it. And then, sometimes you get back to me, sometimes you don't. So it kind of got to the point where we need to start making this information publicly available. There's a lot of people and actors in Haiti. There's a lot of government ministries from the national level. There's local governments. They all need this information and this data. And it doesn't do any good to do all this work and then not have it available. And I just wanted to note that this collection of articles we work towards pulling a lot of different researchers that have been working in Haiti for years and years. There's lots of experts out there. We pulled them all together, got them to, some of them reluctantly commit to publishing some of the work they've done over the years. And so it's a collaboration really of over 20 passionate water experts in Haiti. 16 organizations and universities were involved in these publications. And these publications are only a very small sliver of what's been done and what's available post 2010 earthquake. And the big driver of this was to make things available. And so we published this collection in the Hydrogeology Journal. There's an introduction article that discusses some of the issues in Haiti related to groundwater data and knowledge, and then the key findings from the papers. So there's 7 papers and an introduction essay. And I put up at the front here, there's the introduction essay is printed for everybody to look at, in addition to the website link where you can go get all the articles. Yeah, you can pass it around. You can go and everything's publicly available. I found a private donor that paid the 20 grand or so that all these papers could be publicly available. This map here just generally shows the study areas that are covered by these papers. The green areas are areas that have carbonate bedrock aquifers in Haiti. So they're larger carbonate bedrock aquifers. And then the blue areas are the larger alluvial aquifers in Haiti, the sand and gravel aquifers. The sand and gravel aquifers are typically in the plains and the lowlands where more of the populations are. And then the bedrock aquifers are usually in the mountains and more dispersed in rural populations. The data that are represented and in the studies here cover the country. So the first paper I'm going to talk about here, and I'm going to be summarizing some papers that I was not involved in, representing my colleagues that published those papers. This first one is reconnaissance of the Dakini and Mariani Springs, which are 2 of the largest water supplies in all of Haiti, and both of them supply the Port-au-Prince regional water system. So the study basis here, we were engaged to look at these springs because there was a perception that after the earthquake, the spring flows were decreasing. People were concerned because they're such an important water supply. You can see the 2 sources are 40% of all of Port-au-Prince's water supply. So there were concerns that water flows were decreasing after the earthquake. So that was one reason why we were pulled in. The other one was that as Director Edouard was mentioning yesterday, there's a important program to diversify, because Thomas mentioned that Haiti's almost all completely reliant on groundwater. So adding surface water to the mix is an important diversification. And for Port-au-Prince specifically, there's been some big projects being considered to bring surface water into the water supply for Port-au-Prince. And one of them involved some rivers that are near these tunnels. So we were brought in to better understand the origin of those waters, so that they could understand if these rivers that they're thinking of diverting or taking water from would affect the flows of the tunnel. So what's the surface water, groundwater interactions with two of the most important water supplies in Haiti? Tunnel Dakini is a tunnel that was constructed in 1940s. It was first thought about during the U.S. occupation and completed while the U.S. was still involved in Haiti, but it was after the occupation. It's 1.5 kilometers, and it targeted a fault in the bedrock mountains that produced quite a bit of water. So it's basically like a horizontal well that dug into the side of the mountain. It's the single largest source of water for the Port-au-Prince water system. And then towards Léogâne, a little farther away, is Sus Mariani, which is the largest spring that feeds the Port-au-Prince water system. And that's a drain for the big bedrock regional aquifer. It's a significant spring. Unfortunately, because of its elevation, it needs a pumping station to pump into the Port-au-Prince water system. The photos above show the tunnel Dakini. We had the privilege to walk through it and characterize its geology and hydrogeology. The middle photo shows a spring seeping into the sidewall of the tunnel. And then the bottom shows the captage at Mariani. And they have a really impressive area around the spring that's fenced in and protected and forested. And, they've really invested, DNPA has invested significantly in protecting that important resource. I'm not going to get into the crazy details of the methods and the data. That's all in the papers. But the key takeaways and findings here, after looking at the data, getting the data and compiling the data was probably the hardest part of this project. We spent countless hours and days in the government, in the CTE offices, the DNPA offices, and just trying to get data that they had, and looking through old notebooks and going back to the 70s even. So a lot of this project was actually like pulling together all sorts of stuff that's been done over the years. And it was actually amazing how much information there really was, but how hard it was to actually find. So that's all been put together, a lot of that, and it's available in this paper as a supplemental material. But we found that actually the flows were indicating probably not earthquake impacts significantly to the flows, but the flows in the tunnel and the spring are more driven by 3 to 7 year climate cycles. And so the period of the earthquake was after a long period, La Nina event, where there was a lot of tropical storms and hurricanes leading up to before the earthquake. And during the earthquake time, it was receding from that. So flows were decreasing when the earthquake happened and after the earthquake, but it was more related to those climate cycles. And the graph on the bottom plots all the flow data that we were able to find, plus the precipitation from the Port-au-Prince and the La Nina, the hurricane tropical storm events, and then the dry periods. And you can look at that in more details in the paper. We also recognized the importance of hurricanes and tropical storms. As much as they plague Haiti and cause a lot of problems, they're actually very important for recharging the bedrock aquifer in the Massif de la Selle, and for providing these spring flows that are serving the Port-au-Prince water system. So long periods that don't have tropical storms and hurricanes, you see it in the aquifer, the water levels start to drop, the spring flows decrease quite significantly, and it's quite concerning. So those tropical storms and hurricanes are very, very important. We also, with all the data that we collected, we were able to delineate preliminary catchment areas, so we better understand where this water is coming from, important areas to protect for water quality purpose, but also optimizing recharge. And groundwater and surface water connections were better understood from the study to the nearby rivers, and that's one of the reasons we were looking at this data. There's not much of a connection to the river that one of the rivers that the DNPA and the IDB were considering diverting. The other thing that from this work is we started to see how really important this bedrock aquifer system is in Haiti. It supplies these two water supplies, but also just about all the springs in Haiti are coming from these mountain bedrock aquifers. And close to half of a little over half of Port-au-Prince's water supply comes from other springs that are coming from the same aquifer. Second paper here, we're talking about the same area in general, the Port-au-Prince area, and we're looking at two alluvial aquifers. There's the Plain de Cul-de-Sac aquifer, which is where Port-au-Prince is located. It covers the valley and the plain. And then there's the Plain de Léogane aquifer, which is a sand and gravel aquifer west of Port-au-Prince. And those are those blue areas in the map that you can see. They're two of Haiti's largest aquifer systems. The reason we actually we're working on this study was to support DNPA and IDB in making some large investments in increasing the water supply for Port-au-Prince. So the Plain de Cul-de-Sac aquifer was an option that's already being used for about 40% of the water supply for Port-au-Prince system, but looking at taking more water potentially. And then also the Plain de Léogane, can we actually take water from that aquifer and pipe it to Port-au-Prince? And then the third purpose was actually going back to those surface water investments, thinking about dams and river diversions. There's a lot of knowledge that indicates that those aquifers are very connected to rivers and rely on river systems for recharge. So DNPA and the IDB wanted to better understand, like, if we divert surface water or take surface water, are we affecting the aquifers? And from this, we again, it was just a lot of this effort was like discovering and finding data, putting it together and analyzing it. So we did that, and that data set is a large part of what we were able to use to do the study. And we also generated a lot of our own data to fill some data gaps. And so all that, just getting all that data together is a big contribution. What we learned here, though, is that the mountains are super important. We just talked about how important those mountain aquifers were for the springs and Tunnel Dakini and Sus Mariani. Well, they're also equally, if not more important, for those alluvial aquifers that are downstream. The rainfalls are a lot higher in the mountains. The evapotranspiration is lower in the mountains. In the plains, the rainfall is quite low, actually, and evapotranspiration is high. And so when these rivers come into the plains from the mountains, a lot of that water is actually recharging into the sand and gravel aquifer. And we found that over 80% of the recharge, the replenishment to the sand and gravel of the PCS, Plain de Cul-de-Sac, is from river infiltration from two different rivers. And similar in the Plain de Léogane to the west, there is not as significant, but over 50% of the water is coming from the Rivière Momence, which comes into the plain from the mountains. There's also a lot of differentiation throughout the aquifer in where that water came from. So in the western part of the Plain de Cul-de-Sac, the water is coming from infiltration of the Rivière Grise. And then in the deeper part of the western side, the water is coming from a farther away river, Rivière Blanche. So the deeper part of the western aquifer and the eastern aquifer comes from a different river. So it's a complex aquifer, and there's two rivers that are kind of recharging different parts of that aquifer. And then we also realized from the data that recharge is temporally dynamic and climate driven. So a lot of the recharge is actually happening during wetter years and bigger events. It's not just a uniform recharge, it's very dynamic. And this obviously has considerations for, planned dams to be being considered, diversions for agriculture, and other impoundments when looking at developing the surface water resources that recharge the aquifer. And again, the importance of that massive de la Salle, the bedrock mountain aquifer, is emphasized when we're starting to look at the alluvial aquifers. And the watershed are very important for maintaining the flow and the hydrology that recharges these aquifers. All right, this is another one. This one is a little different. This is a study that was focused on in Cap-Haïtien, moving north to the north part of Haiti. And Cap-Haïtien is the second largest city in Haiti, and their water supply predominantly relies on a well field in Balan, which is near the coast, just east of the town. And so they found water there one time back in the day, and it was a good well. So they just kept putting in more wells because it was a good area for wells. And now there's several wells there, and they're kind of at the point where they can't pump more water from the aquifer in that area without causing issues like saltwater intrusion and well interference. So what we were hired to do is to come in and try to find areas in the aquifer where we could find more water to support Cap-Haïtien. So DINAPA and the IDB facilitated this work that we led. We applied two different types of geophysics methods, an electromagnetic method and then gravity method. This picture here just shows the electromagnetic results, different cross sections stitched together, showing resistivity values in the subsurface. So it's the opposite of conductivity, and that helps us understand the type of aquifer materials and then the groundwater potential. Key takeaways and findings from this work. These two methods that we used were actually pretty cost efficient to do in Haiti. Geophysics can be very expensive. It's used extensively in oil and gas and mineral exploration, but in water, it's less applied because of the cost, especially in developing countries when the expertise and the equipment is not locally available. So there are two types of methods that we used, and they were pretty easy to mobilize in Haiti and to collect the data and train locals on how to use. We felt like it was a good method to actually go and explore and characterize other aquifers, especially in Haiti, sand and gravel aquifers. And one of the reasons this data is important is because even though there's been a lot of drilling in Haiti in these aquifers, that data is just not available. Like we have maybe 15 or 20 drilling records for this whole aquifer, and there's probably thousands of wells. So we don't have the information to look at to be able to find, characterize the aquifer and find better places to explore for increasing water supplies. In this project, we trained our team, Haitian technician team. They were collecting the gravity data and the electromagnetic data by the end independently, and we're super motivated and inspired and wanted to see the process through and how we use the data and the decisions that were made. There's some photos of our team collecting that data. And so from all that data that we collected, we were able to interpret areas where the aquifer is thicker. So it's a sand and gravel aquifer in the northern plain. We figured out where it's thickest and where areas would be that are not currently exploited that could be more productive. From this data, we saw that there's actually quite a bit of aquifer potential deeper in the same area where they're already pumping, but nobody's ever drilled deeper. And so that deeper area, even though you're near the coast, that deeper area is getting replenished like from far back in the plains. So that sand and gravel is connected way back in the plain. So it has a lower saltwater intrusion risk than the shallower stuff. And so from this study, IDB and the USAID funded a deep exploratory borehole to go look into that. And it was successful. We found a whole nother aquifer deeper down there. It's not quite as productive, but the water quality is actually better than a shallow aquifer. So that was a good success because they can develop more water from the same area that already has the water infrastructure and not negatively impact that shallow aquifer. And then also we delineated areas in other areas in Plain du Nord and Cuauhtémoc Morin where we can go and develop that have less stress. We can go and explore in those areas for supplemental water supply and future demands. And then this guy, how's my time? I'm good on time. This is another study. This is in Gonaives, and Gonaives is the third largest city in Haiti. Wow. So we covered Port-au-Prince, we covered Cap-Haïtien, and now we're in Gonaives, which is the third largest city in Quito. Oh, did? Oh, Cap is 12? Oh, okay. Okay, well. Okay. Okay. So we're covering now we're into the three largest cities in Haiti. So here we were enrolled to look into Gonaives because IDB and DINAPA wanted to make investments in the water system there, increasing capacity and in storage and improving the system, and potentially looking at spending a lot of money. And so in advance of that, we were asked to try to find as much data as we could, spend some time out in the field and try to understand the aquifer system more, because the aquifer in Gonaives is the source of water for the entire city right now. They have 3 or 4 wells. And it's also an important resource for agriculture historically. And so we were brought in to learn more about the aquifer to help guide how DINAPA and the IDB were going to advance planning and investments for improving the water system and in expanding capacity. Gonaives is interesting because it's actually one of the driest areas in Haiti. The rainfall is very low, and in fact, in the mountains, you can see in the map where Enri is. Enri's there. That's in the mountains on the Enri River. The rainfall up in the mountains is 3 times greater than in the low-lying plains of Gonaives. And this map shows the aquifer system, which is the red line, and then the watershed that contributes to that aquifer system. It's also historically been an aquifer used for irrigation. There's a lot of irrigation wells. There's been big investments in power infrastructure in Gonaives to support the irrigation wells, because it is one of the drier regions of Haiti. And Northwest Haiti has a lot of food security issues. And this has historically been seen as kind of a food security hub with the aquifer there and the water supply there for agriculture. And again, we spent a lot of time finding and putting data together to do this work. So that data is all available now and put together. And then we also did field work and collected our own data to fill some gaps and answer some of the questions that were presented to us. And Gonaives is kind of famous. pretty famous because it has some of the highest yielding wells. The alluvial aquifer there has some of the highest yielding wells in the whole country. A lot of them are agricultural wells. But what we found out during our work here is that even though it has the highest yielding wells, it doesn't necessarily have the highest recharge and the greatest amount of water availability long term. And then if similarly to the Plain de Cul-de-sac and the Plain de Leogán aquifers, those alluvial aquifers that are getting recharged from the rivers, we also found that same thing happening here. The rivers coming into the plain are losing water going into the aquifer. So the aquifer in Gonaives is heavily reliant also on the rivers that are coming in, the rainfall and the springs that are in the mountains coming down into the valley and replenishing the aquifer. We didn't have a lot of data on this, but there's also some indicators that suggested that the Gonaives is also quite famous for catastrophic flooding. The whole city is, inundated during tropical storms and hurricanes, and it's a disaster every few years that you probably see in the news. But we also saw evidence that those big flood events are actually important mechanism for recharging the aquifer systems. The other thing that came out of Gonaives is that right now the only demands are really from the municipal production, which isn't that much water. There's 20 or 30 big irrigation wells in the aquifer that are idle now. That sector hasn't really been active for years. And if all those wells were suddenly reactivated and power infrastructure came back and the agricultural industry rebounded, we could increase pumping by 15 times in that aquifer with infrastructure that's already there. And that based on what we did, that's a lot more pumping than what probably goes into the aquifer. So that might not be a sustainable solution for accommodating agriculture and municipal demands. This is another paper that we were involved with. I'm not going to talk a lot about this one, but we use in understanding water resources, we use isotopic data quite a bit. And it's something that, WASH sector doesn't really use or apply, but it's something in the WASH world. If WASH can start thinking more about the resources and some of the data that they're collecting, for example, like when water point inventories are happening, and there's some other data that would be very important for understanding the resource, and isotope data is one of them. Chloride data is another, but there's other examples of simple data that could be integrated into WASH data collection efforts that would significantly help understand water resources in data scarce regions. But isotope, so this paper basically spent an effort to pull all the isotope data together that was known for Haiti, and some basically developing a database of all that isotope data, analyzing it to a certain extent. There's about 250 samples from 190 locations around the country. 11 different people or organizations had this kind of data that we pulled together. And isotopes really help us understand aquifer recharge. So the more isotope data we have for a country and for different aquifers, the more we can actually understand how is that aquifer being recharged? Where is the water coming from that's recharging it? Is it river water? Is it atmospheric air coming from the west, from the north? That kind of information you can learn from the isotopes. It also helps us understand what is the source of salinity in the water. So like in Haiti, there's a lot of wells that in Port-au-Prince, especially that are having higher salinity, but it might not be from seawater. We actually found in the Plain de Cul-de-sac, it's in some areas it's actually from older water that's deeper. And as the upper layers that are fresher get depleted, the older water becomes more of the yield that's coming out of the well. So you can look at isotope data to try to figure out what the origin of that salinity is when there are issues. And like I said, it also helps with the surface water, groundwater interaction. helping with aquifer sustainability studies. This study here was done by my colleagues at BRGM, which is the French Geological Survey. And they developed a model for the Plains du Nord Massac Aquifer, which is in the, it covers all the way from Cap Haitian to the Dominican border. It's a transboundary aquifer shared with the Dominican Republic. Now, this map doesn't go into the Dominican. So it's a big plain aquifer, one of the largest in Haiti. And they were commissioned by USAID to come in and look at the aquifer and develop a model to support irrigation program, like where areas where they should and should not invest in irrigation that requires the aquifer. And what they learned and what we can tell you is that a lot of people come to us and they want a groundwater model, you know, all over the world. We need a groundwater model, but you can't do a groundwater model if you don't have any data. So you first need to understand the aquifer, characterize the aquifer, develop a conceptual model for the aquifer, have some data, and then you can do a model. But they learned that pretty quick, and they knew that there are a lot of data limitations to build and calibrate a model. We helped them compile data, and BRGM had been working in the aquifer since like 1980s. So they were able to pull enough sufficient data together to do a basic model, but they couldn't really do the level of modeling that we would expect in the US or in France. But enough information together to look at things more regionally. And what they learned is the importance of integrating the agriculture and the drinking water, and to manage the resource with both demands. And that was really important to minimize aquifer impacts throughout the plain. And there are some areas that they identified in the modeling that are very susceptible to depletion, well interference, and saltwater intrusion. One of those areas being in Cap Haitian that we mentioned. And then they also identified areas where saltwater intrusion was at a higher level of risk from irrigation investments. And then I'm jumping another colleague of mine from Grand Valley State University in Michigan. He took a whole bunch of WASH data that Haiti Outreach and DINAPA had collected over the years. And he kind of spent some time analyzing and looking into that data. And actually, Brian Jensen over there was a big part of some of that data collection. So this is some research that that took some of the WASH efforts and the WASH investments together. He focused more on the karst, the carbonate bedrock aquifers in Haiti. He found a lot of data inconsistencies in QA/QC oversights, and not a lot of information on methods and metadata. Those were limitations, but he was able to do quite a bit with the data. But that's something in the WASH world to, spend a bit more time on, making sure that's good, high quality data that can be used for different disciplines, and not just, WASH data but also water resources and other applications. And then he found a large proportion of the sources had bacteria contamination, especially in the center department. 75% of the water points that were looked at. And then Peter also presents a whole bunch of different ways to look at treating water for those contaminants. Notable conclusions from all this stuff. I don't know, this is kind of what I take away when I try to take a step back from being in the weeds as a scientist and a researcher and all this. Take a few steps back and talking to my colleagues and partners that I work with in Haiti, none of which are hydrogeologists or water resource experts, but policymakers, planners, NGOs. Here's my perspective of what I think are important takeaways from this at a high level. But that data and knowledge, we need to retain that. That a lot of us in this room are funding and doing work and collecting data, funding data. We have a responsibility to make sure that information is available and retained. We're also funding, it's not just data and research, it's also investments in infrastructure. When we go and, for example, drill a well for a water supply, there's so much data and information collected from that that's lost and not retained. And you got a lot of people in this room are funding that kind of work. So there's a responsibility there that if you're funding things like that, that data, there needs to be part of that funding needs to be making sure that that information is retained. So we all have a role in this this problem of data scarcity. And then the other thing that take away is the mountains of water. We talked about those carbon aquifers in the mountains that feed those big springs. In fact, most of the springs in Haiti and a lot of the water systems throughout Haiti, rural, small communities, all the way to Port-au-Prince, they all are getting water from springs that are coming from these bedrock mountain aquifers. They're otherwise there's not much groundwater use from those. They're in the mountains, are harder areas to access. There's not a lot of boreholes and wells drilled in those aquifers. So it's a tremendous and unique resource that's largely unexploited. And again, they're really important aquifers for recharging the low-lying plains and alluvial valleys where the populations actually are. So they're almost serving those alluvial aquifers where the populations are almost little storage reservoirs for the water that's originating from the mountains. So it's basically like a gift, bringing the water from where it's hard to access and way up in the mountains to where it's locally available. And then the other thing is that the importance of the climatic cycles in the groundwater and the aquifer systems, and recharge, especially recharging and replenishing. Those cycles are really important, and tropical storms and hurricanes are, like I mentioned before, critical recharge drivers. And then the other thing is Haiti has used to have a very strong and robust commercial agriculture industry, especially in the 1980s. The Haitian American Sugar Company was one of the larger sugar companies in the world. Were very active in the 1980s in the Plain de Cul-de-Sac. They're no longer there. There's very little commercial agriculture in Haiti like there used to be. And during those times in the 1980s, there were a lot of more issues with the aquifers and water quality issues and groundwater depletion because there was so much more pumping happening in these alluvial aquifers. And it's not so much happening right now. But if it, in order to support and enable the growth of and resurgence of a commercial agriculture sector, it is really important to, like Director Edouard has spoken about in the plenary, like surface water diversification is really important for the integrated use. We can't rely just on the groundwater for drinking water and ag, and to grow and develop as a country, that there needs to be a consideration for surface water, and the aquifers can be in a bit of trouble if agriculture resurges like it did in the 1980s. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, James. I'll ask the panelists who are going to engage now with where do we go, what has happened, and what are some potential ways we can use these data. So if those folks can come up to the panel, we'll move on to our next portion. All right, so I have a hard job. I may be pushing folks along as we move forward. We got a couple of questions we're going to ask, but maybe to start with, if we could start with Neil, work this way, and just do a quick introduction of who you are, and then I've got a question to throw at you guys.
Sure. I'm Neil Van Dyne. I'm the founder and director of Haiti Outreach in Haiti. And Haiti Outreach is also part of the Hand Wash Initiative.
Hi, I'm Ryan Rowe and the executive director of Handwash. And we're basically an organization that supports local civil society groups to engage the population, citizens of Haiti, as well as locally elected leaders to take part in improving access to improved water and sanitation in the country.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Rick Gelting. I work for the US CDC. We're the US Public Health Agency, but we also do a lot of global work. And that includes a long-term presence in Haiti, which has included a lot of WASH work in the last 10 years since the earthquake and cholera outbreak, which we're not linked. A lot of people. So I'm the public health person, and I just want to say a lot of this work, and I'm a hydrologist and engineer and working in public health, so like I love this stuff. But a lot of this work is sort of upstream from public health, but it's critical to public health. So my job is kind of to make that connection. Talk a little bit more about that. Thanks.
We know James already. Well, we did have another person that was going to be here, but at last minute was unable. Sergio Perez Montfort from IDB. And so we had planned a few questions directed to the IBB, and I'm going to actually ask James if he can help us with those questions. Given, James, what you've just mentioned, not just the technical aspects of these aquifers and so forth, but the underlying questions of why gather these data so that then policy and even projects could be implemented. How have these studies already been applied and informed other investments, particularly as it relates to the IDB, the work you've done with them, just to sort of show us some efficacy of these point of collecting these data and making use of them.
Thanks. Yeah, Sergio from IDB is unable to make it, and he asked me to answer this question on his behalf. And then I also encourage Ruth and Rodrigo, if you have anything to add, please do so. But I did mention in the presentation like a little bit of how this data was applied, but one of the big factors was diversifying in the surface water in the Port-au-Prince regional area. The DINAPA and the IDB were looking at ways to do that and different options. And one of those options was a dam in Riviere, Greece, which is one of the rivers that comes from the mountains into the plain de cul-de-sac in Port-au-Prince. And another option was actually looking at another river farther back in the mountains called Riviere Montmartre, and considering diverting that water from back in the mountains through it and making a tunnel, basically, and tunneling that water through Port-au-Prince. And then there was another option, a couple other options, but they're looking at different ideas to bring regionally significant amounts of water supply to Port-au-Prince. And so a lot of the studies we did in the Port-au-Prince area were on groundwater were actually related to those projects because first they were looking at where can they find more water. So we were looking at, is there more water in the plain de cul-de-sac aquifer? Is there more water in the Leogane aquifer, in the sand and gravel aquifers? And then secondly, knowing that those aquifer systems that are already important are connected to the rivers that they're thinking about diverting, they wanted to make sure that investments that they're considering developing further were not going to have a serious or negative impact on the downstream aquifer. So that's the basis for the Port-au-Prince area studies that we worked on to support DINAPA and IDB. It's Rick just asked if we were able to conclude if the diversions would be okay. Not exactly, but you know, the conclusion did indicate that damming Riviere, Greece would be a challenging project because a lot of the plain de cul-de-sac recharge comes from that river in higher flows. So there'd be an added complexity to damming the Riviere, Greece. And then the other one, the Riviere Montmartre, we looked at the two tunnels. The tunnel and the spring, sorry, not the two tunnels, there's one tunnel, another spring. We found out that the Riviere Montmartre solution wasn't going to affect those, the tunnel or the spring. However, downstream, the Riviere Montmartre goes into the plain de Leogane. So there would be some impacts there that would have to be mitigated, but not nearly to the scale in the plain de cul-de-sac. And then I'll just to go naive real quick. I mentioned already the reason we did that work was because essentially they wanted to know if they could add more wells and where they could add more wells and what the level of sustainability was in the aquifer before they start spending money. And similarly in up north in Cap Haitian, they wanted to know where to look for more water so that they didn't cause saltwater intrusion and well interference in the Cap system.
Yeah, just to build on what James said, Haiti Outreach, our organization has been focused on the goal of Haiti being a developed country. And I've had the pleasure of knowing and working with James since he began working in Haiti in 2006 and has highlighted these data shortfalls and this information shortfall to us over the years. So from 2006, I would say, or so until today, Haiti Outreach has done several things. One is to ensure the documentation of every borehole that occurs on the island, and to make that available through the structuring of the M-Water platform, all those boreholes, the pump tests, and all that information being made available through that. It includes a national inventory of all the water points and wells, even though we don't have the drilling data. That data is publicly available through DNIPA's control, but available to researchers like James when they're making those decisions. So on top of that, we have worked with Northwater to create a geologic overlay that helps guide our investment in boreholes. Wherever we're going to do a borehole, there's an overlay that we make available in M-Water that is not a Bible, but more of a risk assessment, the levels of risk. It's a planning tool for where we're creating investments. So it's been very, very effective, and I don't have a dollar number, but I'll bet it saved us over $1 million in dry boreholes over the years. So.
All right, I just was reminded for the panelists, if when you speak, if you could speak into the mic, that way the recording can pick up everything you're saying as well. Do either of our DNIPA delegates like to contribute to this as well?
Thank you. I'm Jonathan Kampata from Zambia. Definitely from the information you have given us, there's need to have a groundwater protection and management plan in place for the sustainability of the aquifer. Particularly if you look at the areas where you are getting the recharge from, I assume that if those areas have, for example, a lot of on-site sanitation facilities that are not well constructed, then there's a great risk to having pollution of the groundwater. So my question is, have you done a vulnerability mapping in terms of the risks, the groundwater, bear in mind the existing spatial developments which are actually there? Thank you.
Yeah, and we're going to have a general Q&A later too. So, but just to answer that question quickly, to a certain extent, there's not really source water protection or groundwater management in Haiti currently. It's more at a smaller local community scale and part of water project implementation to protect the sources that are being used. But there is an interministerial I don't know what you would call it, CIOT committee that is supposed to bridge all the different ministries together for water planning and groundwater planning. And that's been kind of slow to develop because of a lot of the challenges in Haiti. And then in terms of groundwater contamination, that is something that's been looked at. Surprisingly, you know, there's biological and bacterial contamination is pretty prevalent in a lot of places, but there's not a lot of contamination been mapped for other constituents like metals and agro pollutants or industrial chemicals. A lot of the aquifers are pretty protected from contamination, from clay layers and sand and gravel, or clay layers and silt layers.
All right, thanks for that question. We'll come back. Actually, Ruth has got something related to our last one here.
Yes, I just wanted to say that on our side we have an MOU. We have a kind of contract with the state university in Haiti, who's working for us on a kind of platform regarding groundwater. And we intend to put in information like the physical information, but also the chemical one. We are at the step of trying to develop the system, and we intend to integrate either the um, quality information, and so we will put you in at contribution. Of course, I think at the time we will have to introduce the work, and they already know some of the activities that you were doing in Haiti. So in order to grab the most information that we can have, and it's intended to help us manage the groundwater extraction and follow up and everything have to be seen regarding groundwater in Haiti.
Ruth, is that DINPA led, or are you also working with other are you working with the other ministries, or is that only DINPA?
It's something was started long years ago. We had made a first step, and then we had made a meeting with every ministries, and there was YAT, there was a Ministry of Environment, and there was the university and us at the first step, and to see how to move forward with this initiative. And then, so by now, we are mostly working on presenting what's the needs for the water sector. And then we will have again, we keep talking with the Ministry of Environment, okay? And then we will go back again, because in the country, there is also the institute, INARI. It's for ideological resources, was in the Ministry of Environment, but was not in function yet. And these tools might be one of them that we have to use. So by now we are trying to address as much as possible the needs that we have, because as you see, and as you said it, we rely a lot on groundwater and spring, and we do need to know what's going on, because it's take time to build the capacity to go to them and to practically use surface water. So in the meantime, we have to keep moving on and deliver the service. So that's the point we are.
Thank you, Ruth. Okay, we've had a little bit of a sense for, okay, why were some of these articles and the data collected for them, why were they done initially? But the question becomes like, how else can they be used? How can we get more out of this knowledge than we initially had planned for? So we'll move to question 2 to our panelists here, reflecting on the journal findings, key takeaways. What stands out to you, and how might that relate back to the activities you have respectively in Haiti? So I'll just open up to the panel to answer.
I'll start off. I mentioned before that this information is upstream, so to speak, pardon the pun, of public health interventions, but it's critical to planning successful and sustainable public health interventions, WASH interventions. And that's from both a quality and a quantity perspective. Neil mentioned saving money from drilling dusters or dry boreholes. That's a quantity issue. There's also quality issues. You want to know that the water you're going to access is usable. There are hundreds of NGOs in Haiti that are working often in an uncoordinated way, and they may be sinking a well basically on the consideration of, oh, we're working with a church, let's put a well in the church property. Might be a terrible place to put a well from either a quality or a quantity. So, from a public health perspective, we need to do a better job of integrating this information now that some of it's becoming more available, thanks to James and colleagues who have really put a huge amount of effort into that. So it's been a much bigger challenge than I think any of us thought. But progress is being made. So I think it's important that, you know, we try to keep linking these things together, and we can't do public health interventions in a vacuum. You have to take into account these kind of considerations about water resources.
So I'm just thinking about how to frame it, because hand wash is sort of just to give a little bit of background. It's a nationally focused initiative. The goal is really bold and audacious with DNEPA. Our strategy matches their strategy. We're looking to deliver universal access to water and sanitation in Haiti. And now, how do you achieve such a bold vision, right? We know that that's not going to happen through hand wash alone. The idea is just to work with DNEPA and provide support to the coordination of actors. We focus on a whole of commune approach, so an entire area or entire district or a county, for example. And so we're working in 5 such counties. And I think that area-wide approach, you know, with a vision of universal access to wash, needs to take into account the sustainable use of these water resources. So when we undertake these projects that we are doing, it's in line with a broader master plan and trying to figure out how we're going to make sure that the work that we're doing is contributing to the sustainable management of these groundwater resources. So we have a commitment through hand wash to advocate for with local citizens and local leaders for better management of those resources, to mobilize funding from different partners, and to bring technical partners who can support DNEPA and its subnational institutions and the local authorities to do that work. So I'm not a technical person, so I lean on the expertise of Haiti Outreach. I lean on the expertise of Northwater. I lean on the expertise of Water Mission International. We lean on the expertise of these partners to help us deliver that work. But what we've created is a set of tools that we believe allows for a more sustainable approach to the sector and much more coordinated, and which is aspiring to be completely aligned with what DNEPA's own vision is and the kinds of tools that they're developing, which is why we look to develop such a close collaboration with them. I'll stop there.
All right, let me move on to our 3rd question here. We're doing good on time. Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about some takeaways just from doing this kind of work and working in Haiti and working with the Haitian people and the governments, from national level to local level, and the operators and the managers of these water systems. You know, one thing that I've been really inspired about is that there's everybody's keen and willing and excited about making improvements. And I think a lot of international actors come in to Haiti and don't really engage and integrate with the local communities and the national government. And you know, I'm guilty of that too. You know, I started working in Haiti in 2006, and I'm still learning. And I do know that a lot of the work I've done in my past would have been a lot more impactful if I had kind of taken a step back a little bit and spent more time working with the local authorities and the local government, and getting to know how that all works and getting to know them more as people. And unfortunately, I started to learn that later in my career, but the work that we do is a lot more impactful when we do that. And I just wanted to note that as a takeaway from my time working in Haiti.
Thanks, James.
As Rick called me out for being too few words. I just wanted to comment and build on what James said. For us at Haiti Outreach, it's very much about what do the systems look like that create these data sets and create this information and make it available for interpretation. So as we work forward, sharing the drilling reports, sharing the pump test reports, and building in, constantly looking at what would be the next step. For instance, now in the municipal boreholes, we're looking at incorporating pressure transducers to be able to monitor the water level in the well as it's actively producing. But not only that, as we engage the mayors and local leaders in their responsibility around these water supplies, the municipal water supplies, to encourage them to look beyond that. When they can visually see how much water is being extracted from the ground, it leads us forward in a conversation with them about where does that water come from and how does that water get underground? So in Cavaillon and in Pion, we now have those local authorities interested enough to begin putting up rain gauges and capturing rainfall data that will lead to further information available. So we have plans moving forward with the hand wash team to incorporate that into the school network, to have the individual schools do that as a science project to measure rainfall.
Okay. So I think this is a good opportunity to illustrate practically how hand wash works at the community level. So hand wash is a Rotary inspired and Rotarian led organization, which means it's primarily volunteers. So I'm one of 2 staff and we have about 80 volunteers. About 30 of those volunteers are based in Haiti. In the Rotary clubs, there's 22 Rotary clubs throughout Haiti, comprising about 800 Rotarians. So these are agents of civil society. Their clubs are civil society organizations and they are citizens of the country. So the idea is to position those citizens to create demand at the local level with other citizens and other civil society groups, the local authorities, and to help align them to DNEPA's national vision for the sector, right? So that's how that part works. So when he talks about engaging, for example, schools, that's our community science program, which we're testing out on one of our next Rotary funded global grant projects. And so Northwater has been engaged to do all the technical analysis of the data related to rainfall patterns and stream flows. But the data collection, we want to engage local citizens as volunteers to the extent that they're willing and have the time to do so, if we can put enough of them together. And our approach is basically to develop a process to recruit volunteers from the community and to do that through the local Rotary Club in the southwest of Haiti and the local Rotaract Club, which is the youth wing of Rotary. So we're talking probably about 50 citizens in the southwestern part of Haiti in 2 clubs that we would look to identify 1 or 2 capable leaders who have a few hours a week to try and get out there and recruit other citizens who may or may not be Rotarians themselves. So if we can do that, now we've created a cadre of volunteers, and then we're going to provide them with a methodological guide and some training on how they can go out and place rainfall gauges, for example, and measure stream height at different periods of the year, and then report that data back to us and to Northwater with written journals, and then upload it using mobile phones to the MWater platform, which DNEPA is using and other stakeholders are using, so that all that data can be queried by any of you. And then that data can then be used to inform interventions. That's the first step in what we hope will eventually become a comprehensive water resources management strategy or a watershed management strategy for the entire commune. One issue I foresee potentially in the future, a headache, is how do you manage transboundary water? Like when it starts to cross boundaries into other communes, we have no idea how that's going to look, right? But we know that eventually we're going to have to cross that bridge. So I think, though, is one of the things that really encourages me. If you look at the current situation in Haiti, it's very, very challenging. But what we're doing is we're engaging citizens to participate in democracy, in a sense, right? We're building the ability for them to exercise their voice, claim their human right, to work with each other, to work with local leaders, and to improve governance. So when it comes to transboundary water resource management, that's exactly what, peace building is. So for me, hand wash is really working at the intersection of water and peace. And there's no more context in which that's relevant than a place like Haiti.
Thanks, Ryan. I love the idea of thinking about citizen science, at a younger age, of people being turned on to like, okay, what is my water resource? Why does it matter? How do I add value to that could be used for decision making? And so you've actually taken us into our next question here of what are strategies, ideas, recommendations to improve dissemination of research, not just technical stuff that James has introduced us to, but level of stuff that you've just mentioned there. So I wonder, for the whole panel, are there ways that you might think of strategies, ideas for for coordinating the dissemination of various data that are being collected into a stream that is not just collecting of that, but is available to other people who could be a part of that as well.
I'll just comment shortly on it, because we already kind of hinted at it. One of the most important aspects of data is that it generates actions. It's not useful if it's just sitting there. So there's no reason to collect it. So having not only that data coming at us or coming at the government intelligence, there needs to be a structured set of models that are outputting and generating a set of actions that drive that forward. So I think for us, the next steps is going to be looking at those models and what is that when we look at a watershed recharge in one of the communes. Are we identifying the specific areas where, say, they could do a tree planting program that would encourage recharge and so on and so forth? Those models do not currently exist here. It is one of the things that it's in our planning mechanisms. But I think for me, the development of those models, the next tier of decision-making and act is what's up there.
Thanks, Neil.
I mean, in talking to you guys here, what can we and I do differently than what we've done, in terms of getting this information available and helping it be used for policy and planning. Like, what more can we do as practitioners and, applied scientists? We took the step to publish this data and make it available, but what more can be done? What are the next steps there for us?
Well, I think, first of all, this collection is it's a great first step. Because if the information is out there, you do have to know where to look for it, but at least it's available. But I think there's other things we want to go further. And I mean, we've been talking for several years about a database of publicly accessible. It's been pretty challenging, but that's one avenue. But I think we also we need to reach more audience, more different. And one of those would be implementers, especially including those small NGOs, because really, if those entities are investing, we can make their investments much more efficient. I mean, if you drill a dry well, that money's gone. I mean, it's a waste essentially. So how do we get that information out? And I think part of it is just getting people to know where to look, whether that's through social media messages potentially or other things. But then other implementers or funders, donors, the banks, policy makers. I think, getting this information to some of the other audiences is maybe at some of the different conferences like Rotary, or where other implementers gather, what that would be, and disseminating this information so people have an idea of where to look.
So there's been a couple of plenaries this week in which there was talk about how do we take the science to inform policy and practice, right? Like how do we get that to happen? And I think that's the crux of what we call knowledge management in the WASH sector. And yeah, okay. So it's at the crux of what we call knowledge management in the WASH sector, right? So I think these findings, it doesn't stop here, but there's probably a myriad of ways in which we can translate these research findings into bite-sized chunks for relevant audiences, and then think about what are the channels or the forums in which we get that information into hands at the moment that they need to use it. And sometimes that's a really long process because you don't know when they're going to need to use it. But one of the things I've learned from my work in what we call KM, knowledge management, is that it's about the relationship you have with someone. If you create a trusted relationship with a collaborator in country, with government or with nonprofit, and you have a conversation with them, you create that dialogue, the trust is there, then the conversation opens up doors where they feel comfortable to say, hey, I don't know how to solve this problem. Can you help me? And they're ready, you've crystallized an opportunity to apply research findings. And so I think we're really at a moment of where HandWash has developed a strong relationship with DNEPA. And I like to think so. And I think that we have an opportunity for us to maybe potentially form like a working group, maybe in the Directorate of Drinking Water, where we can select experts from different parts of the world, including Haiti. I know of at least 2 Creole-speaking hydrogeologists who are kind of in the early to mid stages of their career, who we could potentially put on a working group and then look at ideas for how we could implement some of this stuff in some of the projects that you're funding with the World Bank or with IDB or through Handwash. I think this would be really exciting. And, you know, it could be 5 or 6 people supporting DNEPA, working together, maybe meeting once a month. That's just an idea.
I quite appreciate this question because I think that we are at a level that we need to extend what we are talking about here, not only for the water sector, but also to other sectors like environmental ministry or other. Many of you are working with other structures or institution who was concerned about those issues. Maybe not all of you here at the front, but there are many NGOs who got working with the water sector and other sector who are related to those issues. So maybe using this way to, I don't know, create a better dissemination of the information and also to sensibilize about what's need to be done. It's a little bit hard to say it, but having a storm hurricane as James show it, it's a good thing for the water sector because it brings water, but also we know that because of the environmental situation in Haiti, it's a catastrophe at each time we have it. So we have to deal with that. And until we need to deliver the services, we do need to have a way to still have water and to treat it and to give the service to the population. So we do need to do other things, other important things in other sectors as we are trying to do big and huge things in the water sector. So we do need to find a way to put in common the health sector, the environmental, and to keep strengthen the relations so we can build something we could be benefit for the population at the end.
Thank you, Ruth. That's all for the planned questions. I'm going to open it up to a few questions in the audience. And so if anyone would like to ask a question to our panelists or to DNEPA, you may do so. I'm going to take the first hand I've got here. And
yeah, I was just going to follow up on this conversation. I think the one thing we know about policymakers is that they don't read journal articles. I think we could all sort of agree on that. So, you know, how do you, and I think this is part of the challenge is how do you take the science and turn it into something that then relates to what needs to be done at a policy level? And so I think, you know, it's great. You've got to have the journal articles because you've got to have that basis. But I would challenge you to think about how you actually put that in a form that you can put in front of a busy minister. I mean, not only do ministers not read journal articles, they don't read anything that's longer than a page. So you've got to turn this into some very clear recommendations. So I'd be interested to hear, you know, how you think you're going to do that. Can I also say that I'm afraid you've broken an unfortunate record here at UNC. This is the first all-male panel I've seen. And I'd like to give you a bit of a hard time about that.
those are fair observations. Thank you.
In all fairness, we did ask Ruth to join us.
We did. And she declined. Yeah.
But you're right, Clarissa. I mean, it's what I mentioned that the necessary creation of a set of simple models that output things in a way that ministers can grasp, right? That create a set of simple actionable outputs for them. That's where we'll be able to implement that in terms of policy over time. They're going to need to see the actions that generates and results of those actions.
right, we'll keep moving. We have a few hands up, so I'll try to get everyone.
Hi, my name's Joanna. I'm a fellow hydrogeologist, so it's great to finally see some groundwater. And I really appreciated your presentation, and I have battled a lot of, the same challenges you have around the world in terms of spending an inordinate amount of time gathering data, when really what you want to do is address some of the questions that the government and others have about what water do we have and how do we use it. I just wanted to throw out there a couple of questions and suggestions that maybe might speak to Clarissa's question about, policy, where do we go from here? I'm thinking about some of the issues you raised. So for example, the Port-au-Prince area, your diversification of water resources. Have you looked at aquifer storage and recovery and those alternatives alongside surface water in terms of whether there's potential there, given the cyclicity that sort of enso cycle to capture water in another way? Similarly with irrigation as well, if you're looking at that in terms of what recharge is going back into the ground from irrigation, like it seems to me you're at a critical time in terms of, unfortunately, not having that irrigation, the agriculture sector, but maybe this is a good opportunity to re-energize the policy to foresee growth of the agriculture sector. So again, alongside coping with hurricanes and doing that emergency planning, but also preparing for a resurgence in agriculture. So just a couple of policy suggestions.
Maybe a quick response from the panel. I've got two hands that I'm going to try to get and squeeze this in before the end. So go for it quickly, James.
Yeah, just quick on the aquifer storage and recovery. That has not, that's been addressed a little bit in a passive way in terms of knowing where recharge areas are and enhancing recharge, but in terms of like infrastructure investments and whatnot, that opportunities have been identified, but it's not anything that's been looked at seriously. Like right now, it's very difficult to even run a pump in Haiti. But yeah, that is something that's been looked at more passively. And then on the other side of it, I just drew a blank. I don't remember the second part. Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, that has actually been looked at in our studies a little bit, and some of the groundwater modeling that's been done that actually goes back into the aquifer from irrigation, but there's actually quite limited irrigation currently in those aquifers right now.
All right, we're going to move on. Get the last two questions real quickly here.
My question is around, I really appreciated the suggestions that were put up there based on the data that has been collected in your meta-analysis. I see likewise, you took a couple of my own questions, but the opportunity around those those major storm events, is there an opportunity there really to focus on land management in order to really be able to capture those events to make them more of an added value for recharge? Does that make sense? Yeah. And
Yep.
Has there been any discussion for that at all?
I think a big part of what, DINAPA and the national government of Haiti wants to diversify into surface water resources, and that includes storing and retaining surface water so that it's available for when, drier periods. So storing and retaining surface water runoff is a priority of the government that not only would help enhance some of that recharge, but it would also provide, flood mitigation benefits and everything, more benefits.
One last question here, and then I have a request from our general director from NEPA to say one last thing for us.
Hey, I think each of you talked a little bit about this issue of pulling data together from messy sources, right? And my question is around what are some of the issues that you find, and what are the challenges, and how have you breached them? I understand, somebody, you have, let's say, borehole wells, drill logs that are in somebody's cupboard somewhere, right? Or you have failed projects that people might not want to share about. How do you get people to kind of open up and be part of the bigger solution, instead of just holding on to data, kind of hiding it, or, not being incentivized to share that information to you?
I'll quickly answer that. From my perspective, it's taken a decade, of building relationships with people that are doing this kind of research and work, and doing work with the NGOs and supporting them in their missions in Haiti and the people that have data, like we help them. And so we've developed relationships and are able to get data easier than a lot of other people. We also figure can better, quicker learn who has data and what, and actually show up at their front door and help them dig through their books and get the data. So it's just something that takes time, like a researcher cold calling someone, it doesn't work very well, but over the years, it's become easier for us to get that kind of information.
And it's a great question. Just to add to that, I want to say that we have been working with a set of NGOs that do drilling and drilling companies that are operating around the country to create a standardized drilling report and have that standardized drilling report be available in M-Water, in which term, if it gets into M-Water, then it becomes available not only to the government, to anybody else. And so that training was actually scheduled to happen in September of this year, but the crisis in Haiti has driven that backwards a little bit. But that is in the immediate future for us to hold that training and begin to expand that as we enroll others. And the intention is to make that widely available data to the group of people who are inputting their own data into it, and managing that in a way that is not easily available to those that aren't sharing their data.
Great. Thanks for that question. And our last word goes to Guido.
Oui. Thank you very much for your present, and thank you very much for the presentation. But I have Neil who speak Creole and French. Who speak Creole and Spanish and English very well. So it's a big person for me to help me. Alors, premièrement, ma première, c'est tout panélistes, plus particulièrement présentateurs.
Thank you to James and the rest of the panel.
Et moi-même, en tant que gouvernement d'INEPA,
myself as a representative of DINEPA and the Haitian government,
n'a dit même bagay, mais différemment.
we are saying the same thing in different ways.
Parce que yon pi gros problème qui gagne en Haïti et en DINEPA en particulier,
one of the biggest challenges that we have in DINEPA and in Haiti in particular,
c'est que études a fait partout, par-ci par-là,
is that these studies are happening ad hoc and all over the place.
Des fois c'est IDB, des fois c'est Banque mondiale, des fois sont l'autre partenaire qui réalise.
IDB, sometimes it's the World Bank.
Mais pas gain une sorte de archive en DINEPA qui permettent que donner ça au rapport, ça au compiler et puis pour nous prendre bonne décision.
But we lack the capacity to create a strong archive of those studies.
Des fois, institutions beaucoup plus fait référence à moun qui finance études là que moun qui doit implémenter études là.
And there's often a separation between those that are doing the studies and those that need to implement from the studies.
Des fois, qu'on a même études qui réalisées 2 fois, 3 fois.
And sometimes those studies are done 2 or even 3 times repeated.
Des fois, yo compare mais moi, l'aime dit yo ça, me dit yo camper. Nous pas besoin d'études parce que nous gon bail là qui
People
l'a
get angry
déjà.
with me when I say they don't need to do that study because it's here somewhere.
Des fois, yo fâché.
They're angry.
Mais nous bien encore.
Yeah, but we get agreeable again.
Et gen yon exemple qui t'est passé tout récemment, m'pa plomb mes partenaires pour m'pas déranger.
But we have another example of a partner.
Université d'État d'Haïti a fait des recherches sur risque climatique, résilience autour de l'eau potable et de l'assainissement.
MOU with the National University of Haiti has engaged in doing research on climate change and impact on Haiti.
Eh bien, un partenaire financier qui dit me comme ça que y a bon expert bon moi pour faire ça pour moi. Me dit non, pas besoin, s'ouvre
I
les
had an
faire pour moi.
international partner who offered to send in an expert to do that work for them.
S'ouvre les faire pour moi, on va travailler avec l'Université d'État d'Haïti qui a réalisé même bagaille là.
And I told them if they want to bring that expert in, that's fine, but they're going to work with the state university to create that stuff.
Livre un gros lettre bon moi, un gros correspondance, mais finalement les m'expliquer le bail là, finalement le comprendre.
And he sent me a long, long letter about this, but finally they agreed.
M'a fini pour me dire que moi-même en tant que mathématicien statisticien, donner
Today, as me myself as a mathematician and statistician,
donner yo important pour nous.
data are very important to us.
Information qui sortit à partir de données yo,
The information from these data
encore plus important.
is even more important.
Mais faut que nous commencer à utiliser, il faut que nous utiliser de conseils avec Dinepa.
But it's even more important that we use them, that we are in action about using them.
Parce que jodi a trop pression faite sur Aquifers là,
Because now today we can see that there's a lot of pressure on our aquifers.
qui vient fait que ou ka risquer trouver une situation avec dégradation environnement surtout dans la région
That
métropolitaine de
risk creating a
Port-au-Prince
situation where we're readily degrading our environment,
que nap là gain difficulté pour recharger.
where the aquifer is hard to recharge.
Eh bien, nous obligés à entrer pompe yo pi bas, pi
We have
fond.
to drill our wells deeper and deeper.
Eh bien, l'on continue à faire ça, intrusion saline,
And as we continue to drill deeper and deeper, we have more and more saltwater intrusion
et puis avec difficulté pour joindre bon de l'eau en quantité et en qualité.
and becoming more and more difficult to find fresh water.
C'est ça qui fait que, pas gain l'autre bagaille, pas gain l'autre chemin, quantité de l'eau la pli, qui pral lan mais chaque année, il parle de 40 milliards de mètres cubes d'eau chaque année.
And for us, it raised the importance of capturing the rainfall, 4 billion litres, what was it?
40 milliards,
Uh-huh.
40 trillion
What?
mètres cubes,
Mètres cubes, 40
Oui.
trillion cubic
Donc,
meters.
qui pral gaspiller, pral lan mais faut que nous joignons une façon pour nous barrer yo, pour nous capter yo, pour nous
We
mettre
can find
plus
ways to
d'eau.
manage and control that surface water.
Mais bailleurs yo, partenaires nous yo, pas voulu entrer là-dedans, mais tout le temps faut que nous entrions là-dedans parce que l'important, si nous
Our
voulons,
donors, the donors are reticent to move into that direction. But we feel like that's an area that we need to explore.
comme de l'eau c'est la vie et l'aile combiné avec la santé li garantit la vie, faut que nous
Since water
travaillions
is life and combined with that, it creates health and life.
parce que chaque dollar investi pour réaliser un projet de l'eau potable pour une population, c'est 10 dollars que vous devez investir dans le domaine santé.
We like to say that for every dollar we invest in water and sanitation, we get $10 in benefits of health.
Merci en pile.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Thank you for everyone who attended today and for your time. I hope it was informative. The panelists, I think a few of us will be around afterwards if you'd like to interact as well.
Take this out.